Welcome back to the Health and Harmony podcast. This is episode 3, and today we've decided to talk about boundaries.
Boundaries in every form.
Yeah, I think for us, especially, it's quite a home-hitting topic because we're also still learning how to get our boundaries up and running, and sticking to them, I think, is the hardest part. But yeah, we're just going to chat about it today. Done a bit of research to help us, to help you to know when you have weak boundaries, how to set boundaries, the benefits and all of that jazz.
Yeah, I think also we were away this weekend, and boundaries has definitely been something we've been wanting to speak about for a while. But it came up a lot over the weekend, and we just think, like we said, we obviously still have a lot of learning to do. I don't think anyone can ever really have all their boundaries 100% set in place all the time. But the topic that came up over the weekend was always relating back to boundaries and how everyone lacks different boundaries in areas of their life. So yeah, I think it'll be a good thing to chat about and just get everyone questioning themselves about whether or not they have issues with boundaries or not, because some people think that you guys are, I'm gonna say you guys, myself included, like I'm like, yeah, I have all my boundaries set in place, and then you ask yourself a question like, and you're like, I don't actually know if all my boundaries are set. So that's why we're here today.
Yes, so the first thing obviously would be the definition of what a boundary is.
Yes.
So basically, personal boundaries are the limits that you decide work for you on how people treat you, how they behave around you, and what they can expect from you. This is such a big thing because I think also when it comes to boundaries, a lot of people don't actually understand exactly what boundaries are and how enforcing them in your life isn't really as easy as it sounds, but it really does make your life a lot easier down the line. Like we were saying earlier, one of my biggest realizations the other day was that people irritate you. You're gonna have people that irritate you, and the thing you lack in sorting out this irritating, let's say, characteristic of that person is that you don't communicate with them. And I was saying to B, I'm like, there can be someone who, let's say for instance, always makes a joke about your dad, but you don't appreciate the jokes that they make about your dad until you actually tell that person that him or her joking about your dad really makes you upset and uncomfortable. They have no idea that that's upsetting you, and you'll leave it for months, weeks, years even. Like I said, months, then weeks.
Well, they're all there, they're all the time.
Yeah, but that person's never going to know that they're upsetting you until you actually tell them, and once you tell them, they're never going to do that again. So yeah, I think people need to learn that we can set boundaries in everything, and once we do, and people start to learn what our own boundaries are, they won't overstep those, and you're just going to have a happier ever after.
I think even before we even get into the questions and all of that, I was just thinking now, because you were speaking about people speaking about your dad and stuff, and I was like, we actually spoke about a story about rocks this weekend, and I was like, now I'll bring it up because I was like, everyone has their boundaries. So for example, Rox goes to the shop like from young, and every single time she goes there, the owner or the manager at the store is always like, oh my gosh, did your mom put wet newspaper on your arms because she's covered in tattoos? And this guy / woman, because we won't tell you which shop or who it is, thinks it's the most hilarious joke in the world that every time they see Roxy, it's like, oh, do you have wet newspaper? Did your mom stick wet newspaper on your skin? And Roxy's just like, like, cool. And I was like, on the weekend, I was like, Rox, that's so out of line. And she was like, I know, it makes me uncomfortable. I was like, well, you have to tell him. And like we say, like we can sit here and be like, this is how boundaries are. Rox has boundaries in every part of her life. But there's times where you have to be like, listen, I get you trying to make a joke, but I really don't appreciate it. So please can we like make another joke?
Yeah. Come up with some new material, person.
Yeah, like all those old men and women we were saying about wearing freaking jeans with holes in them. Oh, did your parents pay off price for those jeans? Like, yes, you're so funny. You have to learn to stand up for yourself pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing with boundaries, especially that you literally have to enforce them every single day of your life. And if you're not that person who is not strong enough, but not like out there enough to keep reinforcing your boundaries, it becomes a very difficult activity to get those boundaries in place. And I think that's why a lot of people just don't set them in the first place, because it's too much effort. But like I said, once you set them and people know, life's a dream.
Exactly. Life is a dream with boundaries. But as we said, we have covered the definition of what boundaries are, but boundaries, obviously, as we said, can be shaped in many situations in your life. So now that you kind of know what a boundary is, I think it's important that people know, like Roxanne was saying, having boundaries, some people feel like, okay, cool, I've got boundaries where I know I begin work at this time and I end work at this time. So I've set those boundaries in my workplace. But boundaries are part of every aspect of your life. It's part of your personal life. It's part of boundaries with you and yourself, you and your boss, you and your partner, you and your family, you and your friends, you and the random people that you meet when you go out. Like every person that you cross in your life, you have to set boundaries with. And I think it's important, like Roxanne was saying earlier, that you have to have your set of boundaries known from the beginning with someone when you meet them, so that it's easy for you and for them as friendships or business or relationships, whatever the situation is. No one steps on each other's toes without the other one knowing and carries on doing things that make the other person uncomfortable or makes them not want to stand up and speak about it. So I think it's important, like we said, just to have boundaries in every aspect of your life. So we'll help with that today.
We'll try our best.
We're trying our hardest.
We're still learning as we go as well, but boundaries is a huge thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the one thing that we have to start off with is that everyone's boundaries are different, because they're shaped by our entire life. They're shaped by your heritage or your culture, the country that you're from, or even the town or the city that you're from, the people you've surrounded yourself, whether you're introverted or extroverted, your life experiences and your family dynamics, and even your upbringing. So everyone's going to have different boundaries. You just need to know what yours are, and we'll get into, we've got a few questions that we can actually read out a bit later, to see if you are lacking and where you are lacking your boundaries, but also what boundaries everyone should basically have set from the get-go. Because I think they are, I want to say, like basic rights boundaries or non-negotiable boundaries that everyone should have, especially when it comes to like your personal space and your body and even your family, I guess.
Yes.
I guess with everything there's non-negotiables, but like we're saying, everyone's boundaries are different. So what's non-negotiable to me might not be a non-negotiable to someone else.
Completely.
It also boils down to your core values.
Like, for instance, you were saying, you know, like the family you were brought up in, and we touched on this with our last podcast. I mean, we will forever and forever to come, because the way you were brought up is always going to influence your life. But you might be brought up in a family where, for instance, your parents work like from 5 in the morning until 7 p.m. at night, 8 p.m. at night, 9 p.m. at night. That's how they've been your whole life. And you might have this boundary in your mind where you're like, okay, cool, I know I can start work at 4 a.m. and end at 9 p.m. And you start working that way, and it doesn't work for you as well as it works for your parents, but you feel like you can't really come forward and say to your boss, like, listen, I'm okay with working normal hours. Please don't get me to do things until 10 o'clock every single night. I mean, it's a long and big topic to get into, because we're not saying don't do what your boss asks you to do. That's a joke. But I just think it's just about people taking advantage of you.
Yeah, and like you said, I think if you set the tone with people from the beginning of a relationship, especially if you just kind of enforce what your core values are, like I was saying to be earlier, if you one of your core values is family and family time, your boss is going to know not to ask you to stay past 6 on Wednesday night if he knows that every Wednesday night you have dinner with your family. And it's never going to be an issue, because from the get-go he knows that family is number one, and you're never going to cancel your family night dinner on a Wednesday. So setting those boundaries from the get-go is imperative to the longevity, I think, of most relationships in your life, because you'll never have to worry about people overstepping your boundaries.
100%.
Yeah.
But like you were saying about personal boundaries and with your body, so for instance, like knowing when to say no or when to speak up if like someone is making you feel uncomfortable when we say like with your own body, I don't even know how to put it, because I'm like,
yeah, not treating you with respect,
yeah,
but also like crossing the line. We all have our own physical boundaries.
yes, 100%. Like, you're exactly like Rox is saying, every single person's boundaries are different. Like, Rox might feel super uncomfortable if someone just like holds her hand randomly. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I might feel uncomfortable only at the point where someone's like starting to tickle me, but I'm like, why are you touching me that much? Like, you can hold my hand, you can hold my arm, hug me, do whatever you want, but I don't enjoy that. So every single person's boundaries are different. Every single person has a different place where they're like, okay, this is uncomfortable for me, or this is uncomfortable for me. And like we said, whether it's in your personal life, your workspace, your friendships, it doesn't mean, okay, because my boundaries are like this at work, that my boundaries have to be the same in my relationships, or my boundaries have to be the same in my friendships. You can have different boundaries for different aspects of your life, and that's completely normal. And you should never feel like less or more or anything of a person because you want to voice your boundaries. Like, every single person in the world should have boundaries. So it's just about having the courage to speak about yours.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So I think, like we were saying with basic rights or non-negotiables, I think there are a few that we need to talk about that everyone should realize aren't a problem to have set up as boundaries in your life, because there's just like lines you should never cross.
Yes.
And also there's things that people don't realize are your actual basic rights. And this is where people who lack boundaries, I think, suffer, because they don't know that they have the right to say no without feeling guilty, or have the right to be treated with respect. Also, that your needs are as important as, or even more than other people's sometimes, depending on the situation. And then also you have the right to accept your own mistakes and failures. And you don't have to meet everyone else's unreasonable expectations, you know. I think a lot of people are brought up maybe with parents who also didn't have strict boundaries or even knew what boundaries were. I know a lot of people in my life who never say no and never stand up for themselves because they just don't know that that's an option.
Yes.
But these are the things that we want you guys to know are okay to have and do.
Exactly. And it's completely normal as a human being. Like, I know for a fact I can come out and say it straight away. I always have a problem with saying no to people. I know that's one of my boundaries that I have to work on. Like, Rox was making a joke with me this weekend. She's like, you're literally always going at 150%. I'm like cutting chilies to put into the food. Rox is like, I was like, do you think this is enough chili? Rox is like, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to do extra. Rox is like, everything is like 150%. And I'm like, every single time somebody asks me something, I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I'll say to Rox, I'm going to set boundaries in my workplace where I'm going to do specific things on specific days. And, you know, I won't do clients on these days. And then I'll have clients messaging me saying, B, please can you squeeze me on this day and that day at like 6:30 p.m. I'm like, sure. And then I'm like, Bianca, you've just broken your own boundaries once again. But I can't be upset with myself at the end of the day when I'm exhausted, because I'm the one that's allowed it into my space and I'm the one that's allowed it to happen. So that's the whole point of just being able to be like, listen, I don't take clients at that time. These are the times that I do take clients. Please pick times out of the schedule that I've given you, and I can slot you in whenever. If it's in 2 weeks, cool. If it's now, cool. It's also, like we said, it's different to do a favor for someone as opposed to overstepping your boundaries. Once in a while, someone can say, cool, B, I need your help at this time. I really don't have another time to come. Cool, different story. But when it comes to your everyday life, you have to be able to be like, this is my boundary and that's that.
And I think also because like both B and I, sorry, please excuse the dogs in the background.
We did tell you in the first podcast there would be dogs. We just didn't know in which episode.
Especially for us being entrepreneurs, like we basically work for ourselves. So we don't, in this particular instance, have bosses telling us that we have to stay at work till 10. But because we are our own bosses and because we are doing stuff that we're passionate about, we're starting to realize now that we still have to set boundaries with ourselves. Because I was personally on my laptop till 10:30 last night, and we're recording this on a Monday, so that's a Sunday night, working on my website. Sorry guys. Working on my website, just doing things, and eventually I was like, it's 10:30 on a Sunday night, you're gonna be so tired tomorrow morning, like you're really not doing anything that's helping you right now, making mistakes, getting frustrated. So that's, I think, where we all can learn to that we need to set boundaries. And I only realized the other day that this is a boundary that I've been overstepping myself to myself.
100%. And it can happen every single day. And I think that's such an important point that you brought up, because I keep mentioning about work and bosses and stuff, but it's also super important. Sorry, Josh has just arrived, which is Roxy's husband, and the dogs are like saying hello. But it's so important to also know, with the place that we're going now and the world that we're living in, how many people are their own bosses is just like next level. So also, like Rox is saying, to know to draw those boundaries with yourself. Like, you don't have to be walking. You don't have to be working at 4 o'clock in the morning and replying to mails at 3 a.m. And you have no obligation to respond to mails at 10 p.m. either. You have also no obligation to respond to a mail straight away. But being a creative, or being anyone that's an entrepreneur and works for themselves, you have to have that time where this is my time for admin, this is my time for family, this is my time for me. Otherwise, like Rox is saying, our whole day is literally you wake up in the morning, start replying to emails, and then before you know it, your day's over and you've been on your laptop literally all day until 10 p.m. or 10:30 or 2 p.m. in the morning. 2 p.m. in the morning. I need to learn my times. But you get the point.
Yeah.
You have to set boundaries for yourself in your own workplace if you are your own boss.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about like the areas where it's important to set boundaries, because I think also, like we were saying with us and work, that was a boundary area that we only realized was an issue like recently. And I mean, I'm almost 32 years old. For me to only realize that now, it sounds silly, but there's probably people older than me that don't even know the boundaries that you can set for yourself, because you haven't exposed yourself to learning more about the fact that you have the right to say no.
And also, in saying that, with having the right to say no, I was just thinking now, like, we have boundaries that we've said now we need to set in our workplace with ourselves. But when you look back at, like you say, people that might look and be like, you know, that's really not a problem in my life. You don't have to say no because something makes you uncomfortable. Like, in this instance, boundaries are setting boundaries for yourself because you need to be better in the long run, or you need to be better at your work. We are very passionate about what we do. We love what we do. We could both work from morning till night, 24 hours a day, no problem. It's not the issue that we don't love what we do. Of course, you love what you want to do and you want to do more of it all the time, and it's just like a passion and you never want to stop. But it's also thinking about your mind and body and everything that's going through this process, and you're like, okay, I can only do this for so long until my body hits crash mode. So yes, you've loved what you've done and you've put all your time and effort into it 24 hours a day, but when is your crash point going to come? Is it going to come in a week? Is it going to come in a month? Is it going to come in 3 months where you just completely burnt out and then you have to take a week off work, or your mind's not in it for a week and then you've screwed yourself over? So it's not also about making yourself uncomfortable. It's also just realizing what's good for you in the long run, I think.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways you can look at boundaries. Like Bea was saying, it's not only if someone's making you feel uncomfortable, it's if you are pushing yourself to the limit without even realizing, because you're so passionate.
Yes.
I think we actually spoke about this last week with Kylie, but I was like working, and eventually woke up one day and thought I literally had got corona.
Yeah.
Without even going out the house.
I've got COVID.
I got COVID from working too hard.
Yeah.
And that was just my body's way of telling me that, girl, you need to set some boundaries with your work because you're burning yourself out.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, you can set boundaries in your personal space. There's sexuality boundaries, emotions and thoughts, your stuff and your possessions. I think that's a big one as well. Your time and your energy, which is probably the biggest boundary category that people don't set boundaries in.
Yes.
And then also your culture, religion, and your ethics, because we're all different and we all have different sets of values and beliefs, especially when it comes to culture, religion, and ethics. But if you don't set those boundaries around the people that you spend time with, they're not going to know if they are offending you or overstepping boundaries. Or
Exactly. And it doesn't always have to be people you get along with. It can just be people you're around all the time. Like Rox is saying, if you're spending time around people at the office, at work, like, they don't have to be your friends, but if they were doing things that are making you uncomfortable, or like making jokes about anything, or making jokes about you not being at the last meeting of the day because you had something else, like, and you taking it personally, you need to be able to be like, this is my boundary, like, that's how I work, unfortunately, that's just me. And people will either accept it or they don't, but you've told them what your boundary is, and cool, they can have a great life, but doesn't that just have to be your friends?
yeah. And I think, like what you're saying now, if people don't like me, I think that's also why people don't set boundaries, because you're worried about how people are going to react to your new set of boundaries. if those people don't respect your boundaries, then they don't deserve to be in your life. You only want to have people in your life who, I want to say love you, but I mean, we're also talking about acquaintances and colleagues and stuff. But if people can't respect you, then why should you respect them and show them give them the time of day?
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that point. Respect is the biggest thing. That's always saying, if...
Stop.
Okay.
I press space bar.
No, it's
stopped recording. Anyways, let's carry on. Fuck, man.
It's chilled.
Okay.
So respect is also, like we were saying, respect is the biggest thing. I mean, if we were speaking about boundaries in your relationships, like personal relationships, then we'd be able to be like, you should only have people in your life that love you. But like Rox said, because we're speaking about acquaintances and your workplace and random people that you're going to encounter in your life, it's about, I think, boils down to respect. That's the word. People need to respect your boundaries, but just as much as they need to respect your boundaries, you need to respect their boundaries. But like we said, there are boundaries in all different aspects of your life. Especially time and energy is what we said for today. I think time and energy is like the biggest boundary that people don't set.
Yeah, definitely.
But there are boundaries that you can create to improve all of these things. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think that's the thing. People look at boundaries as like a bad thing. Like, oh, it's like the fence that you put it, or the wall that you put around yourself so that people can't approach you or do things. But actually, boundaries in the long term can help you build your own self-esteem, build relationships in your lives. There's a whole bunch of benefits, obviously, I think more than we can even speak about on this podcast. But I mean, I think just the fact that it can improve your self-esteem is like a huge one. Because how many times have you said yes to someone because you were just worried that if you said no, that person would think of you badly or not want to be your friend anymore, where at the end of the day you're doing something that you just don't want to be doing, or I mean, I don't want to keep saying uncomfortable doing, like literally if you do not want to take someone to the airport at 5 o'clock in the morning, tell them to get an Uber. Like they'll be fine with that.
Literally.
But people like burn themselves out because they're worried about how people are going to perceive them if they say no to certain things.
Completely agree with you. And that's a very important point, because I mean, it goes with boundaries and everything else in life. I think everyone's always so scared about what other people think. And the better you get at setting your boundaries and realizing that those people have to accept your boundaries, I think it becomes easier for you to tell people in the future what your boundaries are. And also, just because I'm touching on that topic of future boundaries, it's like we were speaking about with growth and change and everything in your life. Just because your boundaries are the way that they are now on the 14th of September 2020 does not mean that in a week's time you can't have different boundaries. Like you might have reassessed your whole life and been like, actually that doesn't work for me. Here we go again, I'm rechanging my boundaries. And those people still need to keep accepting your changes in your boundaries, just like you need to keep accepting their changes in their boundaries. But there's no one saying, okay, Rox, you've set your boundaries today. If you tell me in a month's time that your boundaries are different, I'm going to laugh at you, or I'm going to be like, why are you changing your boundaries again? Who gives a shit? Literally, who gives a shit? Why the hell are you letting people tell you about your boundaries? And why are you caring about what people think? That's why we always fall back into these bad, I want to say, sequences where it's like a mental thought of, you know, maybe I should say something about this, makes me uncomfortable, or I don't want to do it, or I just plain out want to say no. It doesn't make me uncomfortable or anything, I just really don't want to do it. But, oh, you know, I might hurt her feelings, or I might hurt his feelings, or what if his mom says this about me because I didn't do it, and you're like, actually, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. And you're like, cool, I can do it. And then you resent yourself because you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I have to do this today. Oh my gosh, why did I say yes? Blah, blah. Because you knew instinctively when you said yes to begin with that you should have said no. Yeah. That is your boundary. You know where your boundary wall lies. It's all those times where you felt like you should have said no and you didn't, and then you still regretted it afterwards. That's where boundaries come into place. Helps us with regrets. No regrets.
Yeah, no regrets.
No regrets.
Yeah, and like you were saying, boundaries are ever changing, like growth, I think. And also, like you were saying, what my boundaries are today might not be my boundaries next week. You might ask me to take you to the airport at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, but I know I have a meeting at 7 o'clock. It's just not going to fit into my day. So for me to say yes and stress from the moment I wake up, it's So the moment I drop you off, so the moment I get stuck in a traffic jam and realize I have to cancel my meeting or move it out, you could have just avoided that from the get-go. But ask me next week Tuesday when I have no meetings, I'll say yes, no problem. I feel like going for a drive. I can listen to a podcast, or I can listen to the new album I downloaded on my phone with no interruptions, because my car is my happy space where no one can get in my zone.
Exactly. Every week is going to be different. Your boundaries can be different all the time, and your friends, because we're speaking about friends or family or whatever the thing is with, giving someone a lift. I don't know if you give random people a lift, but if you do, well done to you. I just do not do that in this country. But
got a no hitchhikers
there's
policy.
no hitchhikers policy in South Africa. But yeah, that just literally threw me completely off. I was like, no hitchhikers policy in South Africa. Anyway, but I'm sure people still do it. But keep doing it.
Yeah, just keep safe.
Keep safe.
You don't want to read about you in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And also, I think once you start to set boundaries and you see how people actually don't react as badly as you thought they would, it actually helps you improve your relationships with people. Because where before you were saying yes just to avoid how they would feel about it or think about it or even react to you saying no, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And that person knows where your boundaries are, so they're not going to cross them going forward.
Someone, for instance, that's really good at this, I'm just going to bring it up now because I just remembered. So my fiance Ryan is like sometimes too blunt that I can crawl underneath the table. But Ryan is always that kind of person, like he sets boundaries in some areas of his life. For instance, when it comes to moving. So he's always been that kind of person that says it blunt to his friends, and he's always like, never ask me to help you move because I'll never ask you to help me move. I won't do it. I don't like packing. I don't like moving. He's like, I don't care if it's my sister or my mom or your mom. I don't want to do it. He's like, I'll rather get movers, pay movers, get it done, and I'm not doing it. If I'm like, love, but I really want to do all the packing, I think we should do it ourselves. He'll be like, that's your choice. I've given you my boundary. Like, I don't want to do this. That's my boundary. And he always, Ryan is that kind of person. He's like, cool, this person's packing. I'm not going to help them. Like, I've told my friends from the beginning, he's always like, do not ask me. I will not help you. You never have to help me. And I'm like, that's as blunt as you have to be. Just sometimes not that blunt, you know. Sometimes it can be blunt to the point that we're just like,
But I can tell you now, no one ever asked Ryan to help them move.
Anyway.
Because they know that he's going to say no.
Exactly.
I mean, how easy is it? He never has to worry about that boundary because he has set it in stone.
Literally.
Okay, so here are a few ways that you can personally figure out if you have weak boundaries or no boundaries, where you should
No boundaries
have
at all.
Okay, so the first one is like your relationships in your life tend to be difficult or dramatic. And this is because you don't have boundaries and you allow people to treat you however they treat you. This can result in a controlling relationship or even an abusive relationship. Obviously, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but if you're in a relationship where people are walking all over you and not respecting your values, your beliefs, your likes, your dislikes, then you probably have weak boundaries in some point.
Just for an example, I know that someone was telling me the other day about this guy, and they went to golf together, and this guy's girlfriend literally dropped him at golf at like 5 o'clock in the morning, like an hour away from where they stay because she had to, dropped him off there, then took all of his clubs, everything, then went to fetch him when he was done with golf and drinking with his friends at like 5 p.m., then had to drive him to the Vaal to go to another jewel with his friends. And a jewel in South Africa is a party. Sorry, I'm like a jewel, part of the dictionary. But she basically had to drive him around and then dropped him at the Vaal because she wasn't staying there. It was a boys' weekend. But it was not out of choice. It was because she had to do it, because it was expected of her. And there comes a time and a place where, yes, there might be someone who's completely happy doing that and wants to do that and is offering all the time. But the only reason I'm using this as an example because I know that she doesn't want to.
Yes.
So that's what we're saying. It's even in your relationships where you need to be like, listen, I'm happy to be there for you and I'm happy to take you somewhere and bring you home when you've been drinking because I don't want you to drink and drive. But also respect me in that I'm a woman. I don't want to drive alone at 4 o'clock in the morning or at 9 p.m. at night. Like, we need to have some sort of a boundary. So it's not saying to that person, I'm never going to take you anywhere or bring you home because you've been drinking or whatever. I will be there, but
yes.
I respect your boundaries. You respect mine.
100%. Okay, then another sign is that you find decision making a real challenge. And this is basically, I think, because you're always trying to please others. So, and I know a few people, I'm sure you do too, who always never make the decision. Like, oh, I don't know, what do you want? I don't know, what do you feel like? I don't know, what do you want to do? And it's not because they don't know what they want to do. They just don't feel comfortable telling people what they actually want to do because they haven't set boundaries where they actually put themselves first.
And you're always scared of like, okay, this is what I'm interested in, but if I mention it, like, what if they're like, nah? You're like, okay, then I'm just not going to say how I'm feeling today. But I'm one of those people that finds it very difficult making decisions in different aspects of my life. Like, I laugh all the time. If I go and get my nails done, it will take me like the longest time in the world to pick a color, or it'll take me the longest time in the world to pick what I want for dinner in between two things. And I'll sit there and get frustrated with myself. Like, I find it so hard to make a decision all the time in my life. And I'm like, it's because what if this person wants that? Or what if this person would rather have this? Then I'm like, I'll rather have from this place because they won from there, then everyone's happy. Where I'm like, actually, I really wanted that burger from that place. Like, why didn't I get my takeaway? Do you know what I mean? That's exactly with decision making.
100%. Girl, that sounds like my teenage years growing up. Always just saying, I don't know. I don't know. And everyone's like, you're so indecisive. And I'm like, I'm actually just letting you decide because I don't want to make you eat the food I don't want to have or watch the movie that you don't want to watch. Do you know what I mean?
What if they don't like the movie I chose?
I think it's the most freeing thing when you realize that speaking your mind and putting your decisions out there really doesn't change anything. People are like, cool. I mean, if you want 𝑒𝑚𝑜𝑡𝑖𝑠 and so-and-so wants 𝑠P𝑢𝑟, that's what Uber Eats is for. You can order your food from there and I can order my food from there. No one's life has been altered or damaged or ruined.
And you haven't missed the meal that you wanted to eat.
You get the meal that you wanted.
Good. Food is life.
Yeah.
I love that.
Then I think
I'm like, we proper so off topic, but we all talk about food all the time. Like, that's how I'm like, proper foodies. We cannot stop talking about food. Any example that we can chuck a food meal in there, we will.
Okay, so I think there's a few other points that we can talk about to see if you have weak boundaries. But if the word people pleaser resonates with you, then girl, you need to set boundaries. I mean, this can come into play when you never want to let people down. Why? Because you're a people pleaser. It's not to say that you shouldn't. I mean, you should let people down all the time. But like we were saying earlier, if someone wants me to take them to the airport at 4 o'clock in the morning and I have plans at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm just going to say no.
100%. I think, sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
Two words that are super important with boundaries in saying with taking people to Ubers and taking people to the airport or anything, guilt and anxiety. So guilt and anxiety are always two words that are very much connected to your boundaries and whether or not you feel like you have boundaries. Like we were saying earlier, if you feel any of those two feelings, guilt or anxiety, when it comes down to making decisions, there's probably a chance that you've got no boundaries in that aspect of your life.
Definitely.
Guilt and anxiety.
It can be the smallest thing. I always laugh when you go to someone's house for dinner and they have a bowl of chips or snacks on the table. No one will ever take the last chip or the last piece of cake or the last, and everyone's like, no, it's fine, you have it. No, it's fine, you have it. And then that piece of cake goes to waste. I'm like, I should have just eaten it.
Literally. And no one wants to eat first. Everyone's like, dish up, and everyone stands.
Not me, girl. I'm like, I'm getting in. I'll start the train of food eating.
We'll start. Everyone can follow. Follow the leader.
We definitely have a food issue, girl.
Yeah, you see, once again, I was like, every point that we can use food for, we 100% will. But I feel like food is relatable.
Yeah.
Hopefully to everyone.
Then another sign that you have weak boundaries is that you're always tired. And I think it's not even physical tiredness, it's emotional tiredness because you're not setting aside any time to practice self-care and self-love because you're always just doing stuff for other people.
100%.
So
always. Yeah. Everything is always about other people. And like you said, with tiredness, it doesn't mean oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock at night and I'm already tired. You could be sitting at work at 10 o'clock in the day and like falling asleep behind your computer. What is it that's made you feel that way? Is it the fact that you are working super late at night and doing things way past where you should? Or is it that you have a lot going on in your relationship that's affecting you mentally or affecting you emotionally, and that's making you tired? There's lots of reasons that can be making you feel tired, like Rox is saying, whether it's internal or external or whatever's going on. Just because you're working late, that's not the only reason that you can be getting tired.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize how much emotions can physically drain you. Like your mind, I feel like your brain probably uses the most calories a day because it's running your body, it's running your thoughts, it's running pretty much everything. And when you are devoting most of your time to pleasing other people and doing stuff for other people, you're going to get exhausted.
100%. You have zero time for yourself.
I was going to say, you have no time for yourself.
You have zero for yourself.
Yeah. So another thing is that you are constantly the victim of situations. So, I mean, if you have no boundaries, you might tend to feel hard done by because others aren't really respecting you or they're taking advantage of you. You have no boundaries.
You have no boundaries. Everything goes back to you have no boundaries. Not today, Susan, not today.
And also, if you're a tiny bit annoyed most of the time, and this is what we were saying in the beginning, when someone annoys you and you don't tell them why, that's also a boundary thing because you're letting people overstep your boundaries, and that's what's annoying you all the time. And like anything, anger is like a little seed that festers and grows into a giant bush of anger and resentment. It's just going to get bigger and bigger the more you carry on watering it, and you're watering it with your lack of boundaries. So, okay, don't kill plants, guys. This is all theoretical.
Roxy's a plant person. Do not go and kill plants.
But you can't not be annoyed at people if you don't tell them why they are annoying you. And
100%.
that boils down to...
I mean, if you're going to keep all your annoyance inside of you all of the time, like I'm one of those people that will snap and just tell people exactly how it is. But if you are going to keep all of that inside of you all the time, like Rox is saying, it's just going to keep manifesting. And every single time that person is around you, you're going to be more and more and more annoyed instead of being like, listen, I don't like it when you do this, this, or this. And you probably don't like things about me either. So let's have a chat about it and let's sort out our boundaries for both of us as a friend or both of us as business or whatever it is, a relationship. You have to be able to be like, cool, this is mine, these are yours. And if after you've laid your boundaries out, that person is still irritating you with the same things, it's very easy for you to be able to be like, listen, Rox, do you remember that time I told you that I don't like it when you do this to me? You're doing it again, so please can you stop? And if that person carries on doing it, then cut them out of your life. I'm sorry. If people don't respect your boundaries, then that's it for me.
That actually brings up a point, because I know when we asked last week if people had questions about boundaries, they were like, what do you do when people don't respect your boundaries or don't, basically... like
people don't respect your personal boundaries.
And like we were saying, it's a hard thing to say, but some people, if they don't respect your boundaries, then you don't have to have them in your life, whether it's your mother or your boyfriend's best friend or someone who's almost feels like they have to be in your life. If that person treats you like shit and never respects you and always makes you feel terrible, don't spend time around them.
100%.
You don't have to make situations uncomfortable, but if you know you're going to be in a situation where they're going to be there, rather not go. Have other plans. Go for drinks with your girls.
Exactly. And also, like we've said, in saying that, guys, yes, cut these people out of your lives, but also give people the benefit of the doubt. And if you have not laid your boundaries out, it's not that person's fault that they're annoying you, because they are not aware of what is annoying you and what isn't annoying you. So unless you've put those boundaries out, it's not up to that person to come to you and be like, oh, please can you tell me what your boundaries are so that I know I don't ever step on your toes. Bull. You have to tell every single person if they're annoying you, why they're annoying you, so that they don't do it again, because everyone can learn from their mistakes. And if they choose not to learn from their mistakes, then that's their own choice. Yes. But it's not up to them to find out what your boundaries are. It's up to you to speak about them.
I think as long as you've communicated with the person, that's when you decide whether they stay or they go.
Yes,
because
100%.
If they know and they keep on stepping on your toes, then sweep them out the door.
And at the end of the day, you are the ultimate decider. If someone's in your life and they're constantly draining from your time and energy and all of that, and you choose to keep them there, and you've spoken to them and they carry on doing it, and you still choose to keep them there, then there is nobody in this entire universe that can help you other than yourself.
Yeah.
The decision is yours at the end of the day, as hard as it is. Yes, the outcome might not always be great at the beginning. Yes, there might be a bit of bad blood at the beginning, but in the long run, I think it's better for both people if that there is no respect mutually between them, that everything is left. And in the future, I promise you, you guys will be fine. But it's just better that way.
Mm-hmm. Your boundaries, your rules.
Yes. Your boundaries, your rules.
Yeah. I think the last thing I wanted to touch on with regards to knowing if you have weak boundaries is always wondering if you actually know who you really are as a person.
Very good.
Because if you are spending your life pleasing others and doing everything for other people, you actually lose touch with who you are as a person, what you like, what you don't like. And we'll touch on this now when we talk about how to set boundaries. But if you're feeling lost, if you feel like you have no purpose, if you feel like you don't even know who you really are deep down inside, it's probably because you lack boundaries. You're letting people run and dictate your life. And you never take that time to spend with yourself, spend time on yourself, work on yourself, just be yourself.
You
yeah. So I think that's a big one that I think a lot of people wouldn't even know is a sign of a weak boundary.
I completely agree. A lot of people don't even know who they are or what they enjoy or anything like that. So it's very difficult when you're giving to people all the time to sit back and be like, hey, what is my favorite movie? What's my favorite this? Like, you have no idea because you know what everyone else's best things are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have some questions that you guys can ask yourselves. I mean, you may have listened to this whole podcast and been like, you know what, I'm great with my boundaries. But I promise you, when you hear these questions, you may have one or two where you're like, I need to set boundaries in that aspect of my life. So Rox is going to head it off with some of the questions, and you guys have to answer these for yourselves as truthfully as possible. Maybe write down the ones that you feel like you really struggle with or that resonate with you, and then work a mind map from there of how to create the boundaries. But we'll just pop through the questions so that it's easy to start with.
And I think on that note, before I even hop into the questions, me and B are going to put together a worksheet that you guys can download. We'll put the link in the show notes, or you can subscribe to our mailing list and we'll send it out this week. Yes. Sorry about that again. But just a little worksheet that you guys can print out to help you know where your boundaries are lacking, how you can work on them, set them, and all of that jazz. So if that's something that interests you, you can check it out in the show notes, or you can subscribe to our mailing list.
And I mean, who doesn't love to fill in an already done worksheet?
Exactly.
It just makes you feel like you're back at school and you get to do your best writing. We're also obsessed with
stationery.
I was going to say cutlery.
Well, food.
Yeah, so we're obsessed. Exactly. We're obsessed with stationery as well. So I'm like, you can just go write in your little book every single day.
Okay. So here are a few questions. I'm just going to shoot through them. You can just pause and maybe press this on half speed if you feel like you need to take a little bit more time to think about them. But how often do you worry about what other people think of you? Do you feel guilty for wanting to do things by yourself? When last did you say no to someone? When last did you say yes to something that you secretly didn't want to do? Do you feel like you deserve respect? Or do you have to earn it by being nice? And then what are the 5 rules to being your friend? Do you know what these rules are? Because these can be your boundaries. What are the 10 things that you like to do with your time the most? What are the 10 things that you hate doing? This is a great boundary realizer. And then when you think about saying no to someone, do you feel afraid or do you feel calm inside?
That's my favorite question.
I'm like, hint, if you're feeling afraid, you're lacking boundaries.
100%. I think that's always a very good point to go back to, no matter what situation you're in, is how is this making me feel? Do I feel calm? Do I feel anxious? Straight away, as soon as you feel anything other than calm, there's something that you have to work on.
Definitely. And the same if someone's asking you to do something, if it makes you feel anxious, then they're probably overstepping a boundary that you probably don't even know that you have. Like we were saying, start a little journal. Write down, if you have a day where someone did something that for some reason, and you don't even know why, made you feel uncomfortable or unhappy or sad or angry, write it down, because the chances are they're overstepping one of your core values, and that's translated into them stepping over one of your boundaries. And because you haven't sat down and thought about what your actual boundaries are, this is a good way to figure out what your boundaries need to be.
100%. You have to be able to ask yourself the questions, write down some answers, and then work yourself out from there. And like Rox is saying, I mean, we've said it a million times already in this podcast. A lot of people aren't going to know what your boundaries are. So yes, that person's irritating you. Yes, it's happening a lot. But you might find out by writing in your journal that, okay, you can look back and be like, actually, this has happened in like 4 times in the last month. Why is it affecting me so much every single time? What is my value that they're overstepping? Is it my personal space? Is it my time? Is it my energy? Is it my feelings? What is it? And boil it down to that, and you'll be able to write your little list of boundaries. And like Rox said, also that one about what are the things like you like to do with your time and what are the things that you hate doing. Like those are also super important things to write down. Do you even know what you like and what you don't like? Or are you just aware of everybody else around you all the time? But yeah, I think boundaries are just, like we say, boundaries are your rules.
Yeah, basically your life rules. And I think what you're saying now ties so perfectly into what we want to end off the podcast with is obviously how to set your boundaries or even realize what your boundaries need to be is by actually sitting down and taking the time to think about what upsets you, what you value, what you don't value, like who you actually are, what you like, what you don't like. Because until you take the time to spend the time with yourself, for yourself, on yourself, you're never going to know exactly what your core values are and what boundaries you need to set, because like we were saying earlier, you probably don't even know who you are because you've been people pleasing your entire life.
It's very difficult. People pleasing is, I think, the biggest thing about boundaries.
Yeah.
People pleasing is massive. So as soon as you know, and like Rox is saying, you need to know what's going on inside yourself. Otherwise, how the hell are you supposed to know? You literally don't even know who you are. Why is it irritating you? You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's what the whole point is.
Yeah. So I think if the stuff's hitting home, go home when you have time, take out a piece of paper, write down the things you value in life, the things you like in life, the things you don't like in life, the things that make you feel uncomfortable or anxious or happy or sad or mad. And that's how you'll start to formulate what your values are, what you will tolerate and what you won't.
Yes.
It's a process.
Yes, it's a process.
Yeah. And then also we were saying, like, don't go and ask your mom what your boundaries should be, because chances are you learned some of your bad habits from her. And it's not to say that there's something wrong with your mom, but sometimes it's better to speak to a coach or speak to
someone at the mutual ground.
Yeah, someone you don't have like a personal relationship with, because they're going to have their biased view on things as well. And it's not, at the end of the day, what makes you happy, what you feel is right. Boundaries are a personal thing. Like we said, your boundaries, your rules. So as fun as it is, like going to have a chat with your friends, that's perfect. We're not saying don't chat to your friends about it, but when it comes down to deciding what your personal boundaries and values are, if you need help, rather ask someone who's not like your best friend or your mom or your cousin or whatever, because those people are going to have their own ideas as well.
I think that's also an important point that you touched on, like find someone from the outside if you need help actually deciding what your boundaries are. But I think it's also something really cool to chat about with your friends. Like Rox and I can sit down and be like, what are your boundaries of this? What are your boundaries of this? And there might be boundaries that somebody else has that you've never even thought about. And you're like, actually, that resonates so hard with me. Like, why have I not instilled that into my boundary list or my lifestyle? It's not in saying you're doing it because that person is doing it, but sometimes in conversation, things can come up when you're like, that hits home. Like, I can definitely think about something like that. But like Rox is saying, don't go sit down with your mom or your best friend and be like, please help me set my boundaries, because majority of the time they're probably going to set boundaries that are for them and not for you, or what they think they know you as, because every person knows you as somebody different.
Yeah, so chat to all your peeps, but set your boundaries by yourself.
Yes, or with a professional.
Yeah. With a professional. And then also we were saying, obviously, like, we had pretty good childhoods, like I didn't suffer with abuse or anything like that, thank my lucky stars. But if you did have a childhood where there are issues like that make it pretty hard to do boundary work, set boundaries, or even realize that you should be setting boundaries in certain areas because that was normal for you growing up, then we would highly recommend seeing a professional, because they're the best equipped to deal with stuff like that.
100%. Because in saying that, you probably have a lot you still have to work through before you can even learn to set boundaries. I mean, like we're saying, people of all ages are changing and learning different things now. You may be in your 40s or 50s or 60s listening to this podcast, and you've got stuff that happened to you as a kid that you've never worked through, and therefore you've never been able to set boundaries in your life. So it's always going back to the beginning, starting from the inside out, as we always say, and working through those things. And if you have traumas and things that you have to work through first before setting boundaries, then like Rox is saying, see a professional, get some help with that, speak about those things, sort out those things. And then from there, you'll have professional help in setting boundaries with someone who's got an outside perspective of your life and
they know how to deal with those traumas. Professionalism. Yeah, I mean, we can all help our friends and stuff, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to hectic previous issues and traumas, the best person to talk to is a professional. That's what they studied years and years to help you do.
100%.
And also, don't look at asking people for help as a weakness. I think that's such an old way of thinking about things. And that's why, like, you have all these guys with PTSD from the war and stuff because they just thought it was weak to ask people for help. And they spend the rest of their lives with night sweats and nightmares and not leaving the house because they literally got messed up from what they experienced. Asking someone for help is actually a sign of strength because
100%.
it's you showing that you're willing to admit that you have an issue. You putting in the time and the work to work on it, and you're going to become a better person for it at the end of the day anyway.
I completely agree. I think it's very brave to come forward and be like, you know what, I know I need to fix this about myself, or I need help with this. It's always the first step to a better future. So there's nothing in this world that anybody can tell you that is true when it comes to keeping your feelings in. And men aren't supposed to be this way. Men don't show emotion. Men don't cry. Same thing with women. You might have a dad who was like, girls shouldn't cry as much as you cry. Like, who the hell are you to tell me? But anyway, that's a story for another day.
Go cry. Just cry.
Let it all out and let it flow. But
let the emotions out your eyes.
Let everything move.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much, I think, what we have to say about boundaries.
And I think the last thing we wanted to say is, as much as you must set your own boundaries and get people to respect them, you need to respect other people's boundaries as well.
1000%.
You can't run around telling people not to touch you on your studio, but you're running around touching everyone's studio.
I love that example. Don't touch people's studios if you don't want them to touch your studio. Basically, that is the name of this podcast. No studio touching.
No studio touching. So yeah, I think it's a mutual respect as well. If you want people to respect your boundaries, then you obviously need to respect theirs.
1000%.
And if you're not respecting them, then guess what? They're going to boot you out of their life as well.
100%.
It's a two-way street.
So maybe if you're getting cut out of people's lives left, right, and center, you should also check if you may be overstepping other people's boundaries and maybe ask them what they are.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being here today. It was so awesome to chat to you guys again. We have so many exciting guests up and coming, so we cannot wait to share them with you. If you guys are obviously following us on our social media, that's going in the Health and Harmony Dictionary, social media. If you're following all our social media accounts, we will be dropping hints and obviously posting things about the guests on there. But yeah, we can't wait to chat to you guys in our next episode.
Yeah, we've got some super, super, super exciting things coming up.
I'll give you one little hint, one small hint. None of them are from South Africa. They're all worldwide. How exciting. Yeah. I'm not going to have to do the creepy voice.
But anyways, guys, thanks so much for tuning in again. If you are following us on our social media,
on our socials,
please get involved in Feedback Fridays as well, because your feedback is invaluable to us and it helps us talk about things that you want to hear about.
No, their feedback is valuable.
Invaluable.
Valuable.
Invaluable means valuable, but to the T.
I thought invaluable meant...
No, that's unvaluable.
Oh,
if that's
I was
a
just
word.
going... I was like, you literally told everyone how their feedback is invaluable. I was like, what?
Oh.
Okay, that was my bad, guys. So
you know what we mean.
You know what we mean.
We're constantly learning.
Constantly learning and changing. We got lots of words to put in the dictionary. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.